And I found that a little thin washer and one that's just a bit thicker is just the right amount to make it flush again. So all we have to do is stand it up, set our washers in place, swing arm in there, and we'll just drive a screw through there. Before I do any assembly of the base, I want to sand all the rails with my palm sander, which has some 120 grit sandpaper in it. Now I'm just spreading a little yellow carpenter's glue evenly on that tenon with a little brush. Now I just slip it into the mortise. And I'll drive these home. Put a clamp on it. Now this joint is secured not only with glue, but with some little dowel pins. And I've marked out the location where I have to drill the holes. And I'll use a brad point bit, 1/4 inch brad point bit. Put some glue on the dowel and drive it into the hole. And that joint is never going to. Now for the end rails, a little bit of glue and an assemble. Clamp. And dowel. Okay, one more thing. I want to add these little corner blocks. Put a little glue on them first. And what they'll do is strengthen the base and give me something that I can fasten the top down with. Well, let's start making our top. Now, the glue is set up and is thoroughly dried, and I can unclamp it now. Now I'm ready to do a little sanding. And the first step is to use a belt sander. And that's really just to even up any irregularities in the surface of the top. Now I've outfitted my belt sander with a piece of 100 grit aluminum oxide paper. And you want to be a little bit careful when you do belt sanding. You don't want to let the sander sit in one place, or else it'll dig a real deep hole in there. It's not like a little palm sander. And what I like to do is just keep it moving parallel with the grain, just taking off a little bit at a time. Well, with the leaves and the top all sanded, now I'm ready to rip them for width, square them up, and cut them to length. But before I do anything to the leaves, I'm going to run one edge through the joiner to make sure that it's perfectly straight and smooth. Okay, now I've set my saw up to rip them, move the rip fence into the right position, and I'm going to put that edge that I just jointed against the rip fence and cut the other side. Okay, the next thing I want to do is square up my top and cut it to length. And to do that, I use the table saw, and the first intention usually is just to grab the T-square. That doesn't work very well because the board is long and it's heavy, and it's real hard to hold it steady as you go through the saw. It tends to want to rock like this. So we've put together a little tool here at the shop. It's called a panel cutter. Really all it is a enlarged T-square. This one is just a piece of plywood with a strip screwed on the front edge of it. And underneath is a piece of hardwood which fits in the same groove as the T-square. So now I have something that I can hold my pieces steady on. So first I'll just square up one edge. Okay, with the blade stopped, I can turn the board end for end, measure it for the correct length. Well, the next thing to do is to make this drop leaf detail. Now the top over here has a convex shape to its edge, and the leaf has a concave shape. And it's nice because it not only looks decorative, but it really serves a purpose. Let me show you. As you put the leaf up, they lap over one another, so you get support along the entire length of the table, and there's no sagging here. And I made up a little demonstration to further show that. If you just took two pieces of wood and hinged them together with just butt joints here, when the leaf was up, you could get some sagging in the middle here, and the surfaces would be uneven. Now, it looks like a difficult thing to do, but it's really not that hard. You could use a shaper, which is just a big stationary router, and you can buy male and female cutters to make the drop leaf. However, I'm going to use a router, and you can do the job just as well. I start out with a 3/8-inch round over bit, and that's to do the edge on the main top. And the matching bit for the leaf is this 3/8-inch cove bit. Now I've mounted this bit in my router, and this one happens to be a D-handle router. The early routers had just two handles. This one, with its own D-handle, allows you to better control, and the trigger is right within reach, so you don't have to go over and flip a switch all the time. Now one more thing, on procedure with routers. Because all routers are made with motors that turn clockwise, as you stand in front of your work, you always move left to right. That way the cutter and the motor are working at their best efficiency. Okay, now I'll just turn it around and do the other edge. Okay, now I'm ready to start milling this concave detail in the leaves. So I've set my router up with the 3/8-inch cove bit, but because it doesn't have a pilot bearing, I've attached a fence to the router, and this sits up against my workpiece. Now I'm going to make this cut in a couple passes because I don't want to strain the router motor, and I want to minimize any chipping that might happen. Okay, now I'm going to readjust the base of my router so that I get a little more depth out of that cut. And I'm going to run it through my sample before I make any commitment to the finished leaves. Now I'll take my sample and bring it over to my finished top and check the fit. Now see, it's a little bit too high right here, so I'm going to have to make a couple more adjustments to the router, try it on my sample, and then I'll do the real leaves. Well, now I'm ready to mount some hardware on my drop leaf assembly. I've taken the top and set it in the vise with the bottom side facing up. And I don't use just an ordinary butt hinge for the drop leaf. I use a hinge specifically manufactured for drop leaf tables. This is an 1¼ inch hinge. It's just ordinary steel, but note that one leaf is a little bit longer than the other. You're not going to see it because it's on the bottom side of the table, but it needs to be mounted about 1/4 inch from the edge of the table will be our center pin. The short leg of the hinge sits on the main top, the long edge on the leaf. Now to make it sit flush, I'm going to have to cut a little recess to set that pin in. And to do that, I'm going to use my router, and I've installed a 1/4 inch round nose bit. And I've made a sample pass in a scrap of wood here, test to see if it fits okay. And that's good. So now I'm ready to plow out all those recesses. The manufacturer has given us another clue as to which way these hinges should go. The side that faces up has a little countersink, so the screw head will sit flush. Now I'm ready to attach the leaves. But I want to give myself a little space in here, so I'm just going to take some old pieces of sandpaper, and that'll prevent any rubbing along that drop leaf detail. Now the hinges can be swung down, and I'll drill some pilot holes to fasten the leaves to the top. Okay, now I'm going to ease these sharp corners with my belt sander. Okay, the last milling operation is to round over these edges on all four sides. And to do that, I'm going to use my 1/4-inch rounding over bit. Now remember, left to right. So this ash takes stain beautifully. And I apply it with a brush first, and after it sets for a couple minutes, you just take a rag and sort of even up the color. And after the stain dries, I'll put 2 coats of a hard urethane finish on it, and then it'll be good for many years. The only difficulty in getting a good finish with polyurethane is keeping the dust off of it until it dries. And there it is, a reproduction of the classic drop leaf table.